Week 8 of the college football season. The Blue Devils back in action this weekend as they take on Georgia Tech. Halfway through the year, they head for home at 4-2 overall, 3-0 atop the ACC standings, one of 5 remaining unbeatens in ACC play. Another one will be coming to Wallace Wade this weekend in Georgia Tech. They are 6-0 overall and 3-0 as well in the ACC. As we welcome you inside Blue Devil Tower, David Schmidt alongside the 2013 Coastal Division champion and captain Dave Harding. And hey, we got some Coastal Division football for you this weekend for the first time this season, I think. If you look at the ACC opponents to this point, Duke and Georgia Tech, I think it was 90 straight years they got together, had that year, I think it's 2023. They didn't play last year. Georgia Tech got the better of the Blue Devils down in Atlanta. Manny Diaz's bunch looking for a measure of revenge this weekend. And Dave, it does all week long have that big game feel.
It does. Not all week long, especially coming off of an open date. It's been 2 weeks that Blue Devil fans and everybody in the locker room has been looking at the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. As you mentioned, a foe that is very familiar to everybody in Durham, everybody that's followed Duke football for a long time, one of the country's oldest rivalries going back decades. It adds to the allure that they're 6-0. They're undefeated, playing incredibly well. They found ways to win. It's a fun group to watch. They compete at an incredibly high level, great leadership, on-field leadership that you can see. So it's a fun brand of football to watch going against Duke, who has found a spark ever since the first half of that NC State game. After getting off to a little bit of a shaky beginning to the season, they have looked phenomenal and finding ways, their own ways, to get the job done, going on the road to the West Coast, taking care of Cal. So this matchup, in the grand scheme of things, nationally is a big deal as teams now start to try to elevate and separate themselves within the ACC race. This is a big one. All eyes on Durham this weekend.
Georgia Tech, number 12 in the most recent AP poll. We're going to talk about this matchup from every conceivable angle, but let's talk about the weekend that was or wasn't, depending on how you want to look at it. Everyone says when you're playing well, you want to keep going. The Blue Devils have won 3 in a row. They're 3 in a row, I should say. They're 3-0 in ACC play, but as a guy who lived in the trenches and know what 6 consecutive games can do to your body, how valuable for the guys, the starters, everyone on down the line, just to have a week to rest and recuperate.
Yeah, incredibly valuable, especially when you consider Georgia Tech had to play Virginia Tech this past Saturday. So they're having to turn right around and prepare for a really talented Blue Devil team. Duke had an opportunity, especially coming off that long road trip out to Cal, to get their legs back underneath them, recuperate a little bit, and also focus from a mental perspective on making sure that you've got a game plan ready for the Yellow Jackets. I have never seen a schedule come together this way, what Duke has, given that normally you're trying to use that open date to prepare for several opponents. The coaching staff trying to get a beat and a head start on the scouting reports for who you're going to play the next week and the following week. This one is a one-game season, essentially, because it's bookended by another bye week and an open date. So Duke has singular focus here, taking care of the Yellow Jackets. I think the only risk that you have with a setup like this is more on the offense, where you'd found a rhythm. I mean, against Cal, Darian Mensah and company could not be stopped, and they just kept getting sharper and sharper. Does taking a week off and changing up the rhythm of what you've seen on the practice field and just your typical schedule impact at all the product on the field come game day? I don't expect that to be an issue, but I think if you're looking for potentially one downside to the way that things have stacked up from a schedule perspective, it would be that.
Blue Devils ripped off 38 unanswered to get the win out in Berkeley, 45-21, well after everyone's bedtime, including Mr. Harding. All right, let's talk about Georgia Tech a little bit. And Dave, when you look at these stats, what jumps out initially?
There's so much. First of all, this guy's out of the corner of my eye. Haynes King leading the way for a lot of these offensive stats. I see a group offensively to start with that's incredibly efficient. They're not going to wow you in their passing yardage necessarily, but the efficiency at which they pass the ball when they decide to do so is one of the best in the entire conference. And third downs, they're doing a pretty good job of getting and staying on the field. Their rushing attack is what leads the way. rushing it for over 230 yards a game is
second in the ACC.
Insane. They're just incredibly physical up front. They're willing to run it on third down. They're an aggressive bunch and have really taken on the demeanor and the attitude of Brent Key, their head coach, a former offensive lineman. You can see it's a run-first type attack. And we can talk about this a little bit more, but not only are they just going to get up there and, pound you and say, look, we're just going to be more physical and run the ball. They've got a good run scheme that puts a defense in a bind with all sorts of shifts and motions. Defensively, they had not been great in giving up yardage, but they're a pretty good scoring defense, and they limit the opposing team's opportunities to get into the end zone. And I think if you're trying to pick, if you're a defensive coordinator or a fan of your specific team, that's where you want your defense to excel, obviously. They've given up some explosive plays. Some of that is indicative and shows up in the yardage. But overall, this points per game is the most important statistic, and they have found a way to limit opponents to and their scoring opportunities.
Yeah, there are a couple scoring oddities when you look at this matchup. Georgia Tech's defense in ACC play has not allowed a point in the opening quarter. You flip it over and talk about the Blue Devils. All 13 of the points that they've given up in the second half were against NC State. The last two games, no points allowed. Really, after the 12-minute mark of the second quarter, because Syracuse got a field goal early, that was it. And then that touchdown for Cal that put them up 21-7 was early in the second quarter. So Jonathan Patkey's bunch has really locked it down as the game has moved along. But let's talk about this guy that's standing behind you in Haynes King. Dave, when I look at this Georgia Tech offense kind of as a layman, to me, it's like the living embodiment of the hidden ball trick of like every snap, they've got guys running in opposite directions. And literally, I would imagine, particularly at the linebacker level, you got to look through the offensive line. It's really hard to see who's got the football.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not quite the Paul Johnson option offense
that
everybody talked about. It is worse because they've got a passing component too. And it's not just a heave it on a prayer type passing component. It's a very calculated. They run good routes. They get tight ends, running past defenders out of the backfield when they're in motion and slip the ball down there. They've got a pretty good screen game on the perimeter. Haynes King's got the arm to be able to launch it one-on-one. Their receiving core is deep and good. So, yeah, an offense, and I kind of talked about it a second ago, they're not just about beating you with physicality, which they will do, but the scheme puts them in a position that gets a defense back on their heels very quickly. And for Duke, and we'll talk about this in a minute, with some injuries that you've seen at the linebacker position in particular, and some young players, a lot of true freshmen and underclassmen being thrust into big-time roles within the Duke defense, a team like this can shock you because not only do they do the old hidden ball trick of where are we going, how are we going to attack you, some misdirection looks. Every week they do a good job of scheming it up to where they run their plays, but they get to those plays differently. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to get a tell or a jump on where the ball's going or what's coming. It's much more you have to read what you're seeing in the moment and react to it. And that can be a challenge for a young player.
Yeah, I mean, you think about this linebacker room. Well, first of all, Manny Diaz told us earlier in the week they're hoping to get healthier this week, hoping to get Kendall Johnson back on the field and Trey Freeman as well. That will certainly help from a depth standpoint and experience standpoint. But one of the matchups I'm very interested to see, you mentioned how good Georgia Tech is running the football. If you look at this, the Blue Devils only giving up 123 yards a game on the ground, and even this is a little bit deceiving. Now Haynes King is a running quarterback. But, Dave, a lot of those yardage were quarterback scrambles in the Tulane game, the Elon game to a certain extent. This defense against first and second down traditional run games, and I know there's nothing traditional about how Georgia Tech runs the football, has been awfully good. That is going to be a fascinating matchup to watch early in the game.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, and a lot of those quarterback runs were earlier in the season. I'm thinking like Tulane, which actually a decent comp, what you saw out of Ratliff.
Jake Retzloff.
Retzloff, Haynes King, similar style in that they're willing to put their body on the line and keep running. But yeah, I think when you talk about traditional style of runs, Cal certainly got shut down 2 weeks ago. Illinois, we knew that they were going to be Big Ten, come in, try to run the ball. They had had success in that, and Duke was able to stymie that attack. A lot of it's
Syracuse,
because
not much success.
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. This is a little bit different given the ways that they get to the run game, and they can make it look like it's going to be a pass situation, and kind of they're just good at attacking you with things that you don't expect. But this is a strength in the Georgia Tech run game against a strength in the Duke defense that has been very physical up front. Another thing to point out when we're talking about defense is this figure right here, third downs. Georgia Tech very, very good defensively on third downs, limiting opponents just 35%. Last week against Virginia Tech did not convert a single third down. That never happens. It was crazy. I think they were 0 for 12. So if we're talking about strength against strength there, the Duke offense has done a much better job of staying on the field. They've been converting third downs at a 44% clip. That's going to be definitely something to watch. The Georgia Tech defense not only really strong in stopping teams scoring, strong at forcing teams not to convert third down.
Yeah, and if you're just looking at box scores, don't be deceived. I know Georgia Tech beat Virginia Tech 35-21. They controlled that football game. It was 18-0, and they just kind of managed the score to the finish line. But let's talk about this matchup you're talking about. Duke offensively and Georgia Tech defensively. A lot of familiarity there. Blake Gideon is the new defensive coordinator down at Georgia Tech. Jess Simpson is still there coaching the defensive line. Of course, he was at Duke for a few years. Gideon comes over from Texas. When he was playing at Texas, Manny Diaz actually was his coach. We were talking about that earlier in the week. And Johnny Brewer, he and Blake Gideon were GAs together back in the day. So there's some familiarity between these two. But to me, one stat I'm interested in, this rushing game for the Blue Devils during this 3-game win streak has come along 157 yards per game. Much better than that the last 3 games. And you look down, they're giving up 169 yards per game on the ground. Dave, that's 17th in the ACC. There should be opportunities, one would think, to run the football.
Yeah, absolutely. And 17th, that's worst. Last in the ACC. They've given up some big plays, and that's going to be an important piece to this game for Duke. Is that Georgia Tech? We've talked about what they do well defensively. And they'll jump on you, and they're physical, they're aggressive off the line of scrimmage. You might get knocked back. You might see a 3 and out. You might get situations where you have negative yardage plays. You've got to keep chipping away, because a big issue that they've had are some of these explosive runs, and it wears on the team. Yes, Georgia Tech was in control of the ball game last week against Virginia Tech. However, the second half, Virginia Tech was chipping away. They came out running the ball and had some success. So you somewhat have to weather the storm, and there are going to be some opportunities for the likes of Nate Shepard, Anderson Castle, to get in there behind an offense that has been very well balanced, but like you said, has seen their run game really come to life and complements the style of Darian Mensah incredibly well.
One more thought on the Blue Devils defensively against Georgia Tech offensively. Stylistically, the way Georgia Tech plays, they get the ball out fast. The quick screen game is awfully good. We talked about the running game. Because of that, they very rarely take negative plays. I think they've only allowed like 3 sacks on the year. The offensive line is good. Of course, the Blue Devils have 17. They had 6 their last time out against Cal. They're top 5 in the country in TFLs. So I guess it kind of begs the question, those are going to be hard to come by on Saturday just because of the way Georgia Tech plays. So how do the Blue Devils want to approach this defensively, trying to pick their places to create those big negative plays? Because the razor's edge, right? If you can get Georgia Tech behind the sticks, it's a little bit different offense they have to run. You don't have to be as fearful of the run game. But I imagine it's a mental challenge as much as anything for the defense that you're not going to be able to just feast and go after in a traditional pass rush.
Yeah, it's not a traditional drop back and pass. A lot of the passes that we've talked about are also off of play action. So it's a hard run fake. Quarterback will look like he's tossing it, or it looks like it's a handoff, and they set up pretty well, a little bit of a pocket. Maybe he'll flush to the side and launch it down the field. So the sack number, I don't expect to grow by all that much unless Duke is able, and I'm tipping my hat a little bit on the keys here, if Duke can force Georgia Tech into more obvious passing situations, a scenario that they don't want to be in, because that's not what the offense is predicated on, then you've got an opportunity to really feast, because this is a very good offensive line. They're at their best when they're getting down the field, pushing people at the line of scrimmage off the block. Pass protection, there have been some twists that have given them some issues, so there is a chance for this Duke defensive front to feast. But the first thing is you've got to force them into those situations. Easier said than done. One thing, though, and you said it, TFLs, this is an aggressive Duke defensive front. Similar styles. These aren't hat-reading defensive lines where you'll see a big guy just stand up, hold on to an offensive lineman, and wait for a running back to choose which side they're going and then jump on them. These are defensive lines that you see at the snap, launch off the football. So it's going to be some big collisions, but an opportunity for some lost yardage plays because of how aggressive these fronts like to play.
You can tell we're drooling. Two big-time offenses. Darian Mensah, we haven't even talked about yet, leads the ACC in just about every passing category, including touchdowns. And you got Haynes King as a quarterback. Don't be surprised to see him run it 20 or more times on Saturday afternoon. He's the third leading rusher in the ACC for anybody, not just quarterbacks, and has the most rushing touchdowns on the season. So these two defenses will certainly be tested. All right, let's get into our players to watch. You mentioned tipping your hand. Shocker that I went with Nate Shepard, the talented running back. A couple of touchdown runs in the game out of California, backing up what he did at Syracuse. And you mentioned the aggressive nature of Georgia Tech's defense as well. Dave, when he gets through the initial line, good luck to everybody in the secondary.
Exactly, and that's been the problem. Sometimes you'll have Georgia Tech miss a line a little bit or over pursue at the linebacker level. You're able to bust through or maybe sidestep one of the tacklers that is inevitably going to be knifing into the backfield. And Nate Shepard has exhibited tremendous breakaway speed and that shiftiness to avoid contact. He's got an opportunity to have a big game.
All right, tell us about your guys.
Yeah, I think we've talked about what a problem this Georgia Tech offense is. Haynes King leading the way. Duke has struggled with quarterback runs. He's definitely going to run it. When a quarterback runs it, there's typically a blocker out in front, a linebacker or a running back or an H-back leading the way. Puts a lot of pressure and strain on the linebacking core. This is a linebacking core that has been decimated by injury. Nick Morris out for the season. He was a starting Mike linebacker. And these true freshmen, Elliott Shopper, Bradley Gompers, have found a way to step up and have played incredibly well. Gompers didn't get a ton of reps against Cal because of a targeting penalty. He'll be back, though, able to play in the first half because it occurred in the first half of the Cal game. So he's back full speed, ready to go against Georgia Tech. But Shopper really stuck out to me in flying around the football field, not just in his identification and his understanding of where the football is going, but in his closing speed and his ability to cover ground quickly and make sound tackles in the open field. That's going to happen against Georgia Tech. They're going to scheme different looks up, whether that's pin and pull, quarterback power, fullback dive. You are going to see everything thrown at you. And for any linebacking core, no matter how experienced, it puts a lot of pressure on them. These young players are going to have to step up, play really well, and they've shown the ability to do that, but a lot of attention and emphasis on them. Luckily for Duke, it seems like they're getting a little bit healthy. Trey Freeman, obviously the all-star linebacker for the Blue Devils, appears to be making a comeback. Coaches were optimistic about having him back on Saturday. Kendall Johnson, another one of those players in the mix. Obviously, Luke Murgatt has been playing well. So a good rotation, but Duke really needs these young players, the true freshman linebackers there to have a big day against a Georgia Tech offense that poses a lot of issues.
Given the respect, obviously, we've talked about that Manny Diaz's bunch has for what Georgia Tech does overall for sure, but certainly offensively, how valuable these 3 games in ACC play. The Blue Devils have found themselves behind by double digits against NC State and against California, and they just kept playing and kind of battled through some of that because as good as Georgia Tech is offensively, I think it's hard to believe you just come out and you're going to shut them out totally. To have that mental fortitude to be able to say, okay, they won that battle, let's get back in the fight and do it again. The fact that they've done that already, to me, feels like it's going to be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a top 15 team. It's not going to be easy. Yeah, you're playing at home, which is a benefit, but you realize that this is going to be a significant battle. And again, it's a battle that means something incredibly important in that you're trying to get to Charlotte. This is a chance to claim and retain first place status in the ACC as an undefeated team. And to do that, it's not going to be a walk in the park. Georgia Tech has found a way to win several times this season. I mean, go back to their first game against Colorado. I mean, they had a nail biter against Wake Forest. This is a group that's made it hard for opposing teams to close out, but they've been in close games. So Duke's got to realize they have to weather the storm. As we talked about, there are going to be some big plays. But overall, the thing that gives me the most confidence going into this game is the X's and O's and the play that Duke has shown and their ability from a talent perspective to make plays, yes. But more than anything, and this kind of gets back to your point, is this is a group that is showing the traits and the characteristics that Manny Diaz finds very important. And it's a group that believes that even if you're down, you keep fighting. They rally around one another. They pick each other up. And regardless of what the scoreboard shows, they're out trying to play to a specific standard. And initially, I think if there was anything disappointing about this year to this point is that, you know, against Illinois and definitely against Tulane, you didn't see that consistently. But since then, this team has shown that they believe in one another. They're incredibly tough, and they are able to go wire to wire with very talented teams. So, yeah, they've got to be aware of that. But at the end of the day, go out there. You got a singular focus. See, taking care of the Yellow Jackets, bring out that Raid or whatever the wasp spray is, and go take care of business.
All right, you said you tipped your hand earlier. Give us a key to keep an eye on for Saturday.
Well, I think it's going to be about trying to put Georgia Tech into situations where they have to throw the ball. And you can have the likes of VJ Anthony, Wes Williams that we saw earlier on the screen, tee off in a true pass rush situation. If you're doing that, it means that you've had success against the run, and hopefully you're making them a little bit less. You're looking at taking Georgia Tech and making them less one-dimensional, which is interesting. Usually you're talking about trying to make a team one-dimensional, but Georgia Tech, a run-first type offense, force them into passing. And if you can't do that, look at bend, don't break style of defense. Georgia Tech has been very good at moving the ball. They're going to move the ball. They're very talented. But if you can find a way when you get into the red zone to limit them to just 3 points, or find a way to make a big play and cause a turnover, that's where this game is going to be won. Then on the other side, I think Duke's offense, we know how good Georgia Tech's scoring defense is. Got to be able to finish drives. So my eye is going to be on the red zone and how well these teams are able to operate there. That's the big key for me.
To me, my eye is going to be on special teams and turnovers. When you look at these two teams, so proficient offensively, both have been playing well defensively. You can't afford to give away a possession, and boy, if you can steal a possession, that's kind of how you want to do it. So to me, being sound on special teams, and of course the Blue Devils are plus 11 in turnover margin in ACC play. You can steal a couple against Georgia Tech and maybe build a lead. That's the dream scenario, because for as good as this offense is for Georgia Tech, it is not built to come from behind.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another way of forcing them into obvious passing situations. And you can do that with your offense, like you said, building a lead, as opposed to, taking away the run attack, put a little game pressure on them, things get a little bit different.
I say they're not built to come from behind. They came from way down over at Wake Forest. So it shows you what the play-by-play guy does. You should stick to the analyst. All right, as we get ready for another noon kick this weekend, we always end with a key to the weekend, and I'm going to finish with your favorite topic as we're closing in on Halloween and everything that comes with that. The weather gets a little bit cooler. Does it change the pregame preparations in terms of how you need to layer up, perhaps the menu as you're getting ready for a noon kick?
Oh, well, you said Halloween, so I immediately started thinking about candy.
I was trying to throw you off.
You did. So let me just answer that. I think the game breaker here is you got a little fire going, and this is prep for everybody. We'll probably be heading to Clemson around this time, but you can have a fire pit outside.
This is your Halloween night strategy.
Yeah,
okay.
Have a fire pit outside. Kids are coming and going, talking with neighbors. Maybe got your favorite beverage close by, but you take a tax from every kid that comes by of one Reese's cup, and you've got a bag of marshmallows and some chocolate and some graham crackers, and you're making s'mores with the Reese's cup inside, and that is a game changer. You're welcome. But in terms of like layering up, I have plenty of layers as we get into the fall. Typically, I'm a short sleeve guy. I might do the pullover because it starts to hide the pudge as I get into the holiday season. But overall, like it's crisp, wakes you up, ready to go. Although I think Saturday is supposed to be close to 80 degrees. So
cooled off a little bit in the latest forecast, mid-70s. It's going to be perfect around kick. Your Halloween etiquette now, since we're there, and we got Tom here on the podcast. What do you think about grabbing one of these guys, or maybe Aaron Hall we saw on the last slide? You big make the big pile of leaves and have one of them, or is that to scare the kids, or no, to jump out?
I think
as they're coming to get the
these
candy.
guys
Is that how you
enough-
protect the candy?
These guys do enough scaring offenses all season long. They got to take a break, and they'll be preparing for Clemson, so we can't bother them.
All right.
I'll be eating enough candy for all of us. Which there will be candy in the booth, right? Thank you in advance for
I didn't realize I was okay. Now I got something
It's in my
to do
rider. Read it
before Saturday. We're looking forward to Duke and Georgia Tech. We'll see you guys on Saturday at noon. If you can't get here in person, you have to be here in person. But if not, ESPN has the television coverage, and we'll have you covered on the radio beginning at 10:30. Harding's going to start eating candy around 7:30 or 8.
Bug spray, right?
See you guys.